City Councilman John Nickelson. Hey, John, welcome back to Kiel. Let's start here. We got any money? What are we going to do? What are they telling you? What do you know?
Well, that's the question on the table. Good morning. Yesterday, of course, we had a meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee of the council, which I chaired this year, and we heard from Ms. Jones, the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Whitehorn, the CAO, and our Police Chief, Chief Raymond, about almost $20 million in cuts that the administration has proposed and made that proposal through a memo that was circulated last week. The most discussion concerned almost $4.5 million of cuts to the police department's budget. That's what most members are concerned about in those proposed cuts.
The chief told us yesterday that was his proposal. That's his idea. Does that worry you a little?
Well, I'll say that I trust Chief Raymond. I think he has done an excellent job as police chief. I don't understand how we could cut $4.5 million from the police department's budget and not adversely impact public safety. I thought I heard Chief Raymond say yesterday that the cuts proposed would have an adverse impact on public safety and that we needed to pare those back a good bit.
Mr. John, if we are looking at a nearly $20 million shortfall just between now and the end of the year, or in cuts rather, and we've only been on quote unquote lockdown for 6 weeks, and we both know there are politicians that are still saying, "No, we're not ready to open the economy yet." Are you getting the sense from the mayor that he is ready to let things open back up? What do you think the mayor's sense of all this is right now?
Well, I have stayed in regular contact with Mayor Perkins, both about the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and concerning the budget changes that we're going to have to make to address the revenue shortfall. I don't have the sense that Mayor Perkins will impose greater restrictions than Governor Edwards proposes. And so if Governor Edwards decides that the state will move toward opening for business on May 15th, I expect that Mayor Perkins will be in line with that based on my conversations with him.
John, help me. And I spoke to you on the phone about this yesterday, and it's a government question I have for a lot of people. And I know this COVID-19 is a different animal, but our population in Shreveport is down by 20,000 if you look back, over the last 10, 20 years. But yet government doesn't shrink to mirror that. Why is that not? I mean, you would think you could have fewer garbage workers, you could have fewer police officers, et cetera. Is that just the nature of government? It just doesn't shrink. Once they have the money, they just keep it?
Bureaucratic inertia is a powerful thing, and I've seen numerous examples of that in the approximately 18 months I've served on the council. A very large part of our budget at the city of Shreveport is driven by personnel costs, and those costs don't automatically decrease just because we have a decline in population. Reducing personnel costs requires reducing headcount, and you can do that either by attrition, in other words, by not replacing people when they leave, or you can lay people off. In the private sector, that is a normal part of business, and large organizations on a regular basis adjust their headcount to fit the needs of their operations. Government has a lot harder time doing that. But you're right that we're going to have to make changes to the size of the city government if those population numbers don't reverse. And I see no reason to anticipate in the short term that we're going to have a substantial increase in the city's population.
Mr. John, Councilman Willie Bradford has resigned, and you on the council and the council members, you are tasked with selecting an interim replacement. There will be 5, maybe 6 of you voting, depending on the health situation of Councilman Fleury. There's 14 people who want that job. Where do you start? How do you whittle it down?
Well, I'll say for myself that I am looking for a replacement for Councilman Bradford who is honest, who is committed to District A and has demonstrated that commitment in the past, and will be independent-minded. We have several good candidates, I think, based on my review of the resumes that we have received, and we're going to conduct interviews next week and come together to make the best decision that we can until voters are allowed to elect Mr. Bradford's long-term replacement in November of this year.
Excuse me, John, I was looking for a little more particulars of about how it actually works. If you start with 14 and you guys are voting for somebody, how do you whittle that down to where? I mean, could somebody literally become city council person with 2 council votes?
Or do you need a majority? Does somebody need to ultimately get the majority?
No. A majority vote of the council members voting will be required to seat Councilman Bradford's temporary replacement.
Okay. The bond rating downgrades sounded very, very troublesome and for me. Negative ratings again. One rating agency drops us by 2 spots. How important is that? What does that mean for our city?
The bond rating, as Ms. Jones explained in our committee meeting yesterday, impacts the interest rate that the city pays to borrow money when we issue general obligation bonds, which were the subject of the discussion we had during the committee meeting. And the bond ratings are a reflection of what professionals in the financial industry think of the city's financial health. The report that I have in front of me from Standard & Poor's from February of this year references things like weak management, very weak budgetary performance, and spends quite a lot of time, interestingly, talking about the city's pension and our continual failure to fund the promises that we are making to future retirees. That obligation is one that will have to change if we're going to address the structural imbalance between revenue and expenses that was discussed yesterday. And in my view, that's going to mean cutting the benefits that we are promising retirees. And I'll give you a specific example. I'm the council's representative on the retirement board, which oversees the non-public safety pension. During our last meeting, we approved a pension payment, and we approved because it was required by the rules that are in place, not something that we had any discretion over. We approved a pension payment of $7,500 a month for the life of the employee and the life of his, presumably his spouse, his designee when he passes away. So that is an obligation that over the course of 40 years could be as much as $3.5 million for a single employee's pension, and that doesn't even include the lifetime promise of health care that employees leave with. So we can't afford to continue to offer pensions like that, and if we do, we're not going to be able to meet those obligations, and trying to do so puts serious pressure on the budget every year.
John Nickelson, Shreveport City Council member. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. John. Our pleasure as always.